Hello and welcome to the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter, and I've been your beat reporter covering the Jacksonville Jaguars for On SI every single day since August 2019, and we are continuing to march forward through another offseason together. As always, you can find our 100% free, 24/7 boots on the ground Jacksonville Jaguars coverage every single day on social media such as Facebook and Twitter at Jaguars on SI, and you can also find us at www.si.com/NFL/Jaguars. Welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. Today we are going to talk about Devin Lloyd and the Jacksonville Jaguars' decision not to pick up his fifth-year option. Now, as you guys know from listening to our show throughout the offseason, we reported that the expectation has been for the Jaguars to not exercise Devin Lloyd's fifth-year option. It was reported earlier this week by ESPN's Jeremy Fowler that the Jaguars had officially decided on that. When the offseason program began, Liam Cohen kind of made it seem like that's where things were going. And, of course, James Gladstone, when asked about it following the draft, said that he had basically been focused on the draft, no decision made yet, etc. This was always, in my opinion, the likely outcome, regardless of what happened in the draft. Now, I know I saw some people think that, that selecting Jack Kaiser in the fourth round foreshadowed this, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think so. I think for the Jaguars, Lloyd is one of those situations where it's a player they didn't acquire. By they, I mean this current regime. He was traded up for by Trent Baalke, Doug Peterson, and his different defensive staffs are who, developed Lloyd. But this current Jaguars regime has no ties to him, no connections to him. And a lot of times when a new regime comes in, there's three different groups of players. There's the group that they bring in, their guys. And by those guys, I mean the free agents the Jaguars have signed this year, their draft picks. These are the guys who are the only ones on the roster who were 100% brought in by this regime. They are their guys. There are the holdovers who they are obviously high on. Guys like obvious ones like Trevor Lawrence, Brian Thomas Jr., Josh Hines-Allen, Trayvon Walker, Foye Oluokun, Tyson Campbell, Britton Strange. You can probably throw maybe a few others, into that group. Maybe even, a guy like Eric Armstead, etc. And then there is the group of players who they are more or less, I don't want to say stuck with. That's a more negative connotation than I'm wanting to bring. But players who, I guess you can call transitional players, who during the transition from the old regime to the new regime, they are likely to be around in some form or facet, even if they don't figure into the long-term plans. I think guys like Ezra Cleveland falls into that. I think Gabe Davis falls into that. And I think Devin Lloyd probably falls into that. He's a guy who, just because of the roster construction and the past investment in Lloyd, he was always going to be on the roster this season. But this regime, has no real reason to already get into the business of, extending Lloyd. It's very clear this is an audition for him under this new regime. And I do think that there are parts of this new coaching staff that can positively impact Devin Lloyd. I think if the linebackers blitz a little bit more, that's good for Devin Lloyd. I think Campanelli, his background as a linebackers coach, I think that's good for Devin Lloyd. So there are definitely positives. And I got size, that range, that physicality, that talent is all still there, of course. I think the idea that Devin Lloyd is some guy who simply can't play is absolutely, if anybody has that idea, is patently false. Devin Lloyd's a very talented player. His thing has just been, really consistency in terms of assignments and especially in pass coverage. So I do think that Devin Lloyd, will get a chance under this new regime to, kind of show what he can do so they can toy with him a little bit, work with him throughout the scheme, do different things with him. Maybe they do things, more creatively with him than any of the past regimes did. That is certainly a consideration, I think. But I think that you can do that this year without really devoting and promising, some $13 million to him next year. And I think the addition of Kaiser, I don't think that alone says, hey, they're looking for something past Devin Lloyd, but Kaiser will get a chance to develop this season just as Lloyd will. He probably won't play as much as Lloyd, but the Jaguars, can form a take on him after the season on, okay, what does our linebacker position look like right now? Can Kaiser step into that starting role? Do we need to find another starting linebacker? Do we need to keep Devin Lloyd? These are all things to me that can and will be answered during the 2025 season. So I wasn't overly surprised, by them not picking up the option. I don't think this closes the door completely on Devin Lloyd in Jacksonville, though. I think if Devin Lloyd has a good season, you very well could see him return. I am interested, however, in seeing how this front office and this coaching staff value off-ball linebackers. We know the Rams haven't placed a big value in them. In the last Jaguars regime, placed a giant value in them. Signed Foray to a big contract and gave him an extension. Traded, a second-round pick, a fourth-round pick, and a sixth-round pick to move back into the first to select Devin Lloyd, and drafted Chad Moom in the third round, drafted Ventrell Miller relatively early on day 3. The last regime was all about the linebacker spot and adding resources to it. I am interested to see how this regime looks at the position because through one offseason, their only addition to it so far is a fourth-round pick. So we will certainly see. I think that how Devin Lloyd's season go will definitely answer that in terms of how much the Jaguars might value that spot. But overall, this is a situation that I think a lot of people, expected, saw coming. But I do think there are a few different ways that this can go down, and all of it really depends on how the 2025 season plays out for Devin Lloyd and the Jaguars defense. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. We'll be back next time.